from Apple to talk to us about how to find the right tech and fit. The right fit in tech. I can't read. So B. Pagels is a Northwestern alum. They got their master's from Robert Morris in business administration, and they are currently a senior engineer program manager at Apple. And they've worked at some other companies like Waze and Cars.com, doing program managing for them. So B is a very knowledgeable person in program managing. And yeah, I think I'll hand it off to them to get us some information on how to find your right fit in tech. So let's give them a warm round of applause.
Hello. First of all, this is like Narnia over here. I was like, I've never seen this many trees around a college in my entire life. Fortunately, a student found me, so I did not get lost. But so just to start off, I would be remiss if I did not talk about the fact that there's a huge strike going on. And actually, when I address myself to the public and to the world, I call myself a social justice warrior as well as an activist. And so obviously, I care very deeply about the fact that folks are very upset right now. I actually decided to still come, though, tonight, even though the administration gave me the opportunity to opt out. For all of you, though, because I know when I was in college, I wanted this type of information. So let's start off. How to find the right fit in tech. First of all, we're going to talk a lot about me. I know, it's awkward. I actually feel very uncomfortable doing it, but it's helpful. There's like a lot of context there. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what I think some of the roles are that are in tech, some of the skills that you need, and some action steps that you can actually take. So, where have I been? So first of all, this is actually a little known fact because it actually does not, I think I recently re-added it to my LinkedIn because I just thought it was very helpful. But I actually started off, my very first job out of college was a store manager at Target. Everyone should try being a store manager at Target. It's the worst job in the world, but it's also the best job. And there's a few reasons for that. First and foremost, the employees who work at those types of stores are some of the best people in the world, and they actually teach you very quickly that you're dumb. And it's really, really helpful. Then I worked in a lot of like analyst jobs, doing a lot of like reporting and things like that. And then I went over and actually started doing a lot of performance marketing type roles. And what this means is that basically I got paid to figure out how to make people click things. Then, and actually currently right now I work at Apple as a product manager. And then actually in about 3 weeks I'll start at Netflix. So actually I'm super excited about that and kind of moving forward and being an even bigger geek who also gets to figure out how Stranger Things is going to end. So, who am I? So this next part is very interesting to me. I do this because this is one of the first steps I took when I tried to figure out what I want to be in life. So first of all, I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ community. I'm Southern as all heck. I don't have an accent, though. I was actually really, really sad. I was like, when I talked to her, I was like, hey, Carmen, so like, I noticed that you're from Arkansas, and I'm really excited about this because there's not many of us here. I was like, but I don't have a good accent, though. I'm sorry. I'm also trans non-binary, so my pronouns are they, them, there. I'm married to my wife. We're actually celebrating our 4-year wedding anniversary. Actually, it's our 654, so 6 years together, 5 years engaged, 4 years married next month. I am black. I know it's shocking, but I'm real black. I'm also a jock. I've played softball my entire life, soccer as well. In fact, so I graduated from Northwestern, but I actually went to Duke originally, and I played softball and soccer. And I had a major physical injury, and it ended up with me transferring to Northwestern. Still, one of the best things that ever happened to me. I was born a woman. And despite all efforts, I'm still a woman in ways I don't like. I am a reluctant Californian. I moved here from Chicago, and I'm not going to lie, I've lost so much weight because y'all are so healthy, and all I really want is all the unhealthy food. I'm a Gemini, which, by the way, so I found out last year that Geminis have a bad reputation. And I don't know why. We're lovely. We're leaders. Okay? Like, we're great. Just let us be. And I'm a nerd. And that's actually the number one reason why I'm here today, right? Is because I'm really good at being a nerd, and I'm really good at convincing other people I'm good at being a nerd. So, I was thinking about how do you figure out what you should do in life? the first thing you have to do is assess yourself. And so what I did in 2012, when I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life, which also you can't figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life, I found that out through this assessment. I started off with my SWOT analysis. So like my strengths. So I don't know if you guys can tell, I'm really good at being charming, really bubbly. I'm really easy to hang out with. So that was my strength, right? What are my weaknesses? I'm actually technically not very good at technology. I had to work really, 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 really hard at being nerd enough to actually be successful at being a technologist. Opportunities. Obviously, since my opportunity was that I wasn't great at technology, it was how do I actually even go about becoming great at technology? And what were my threats? And my number one threat was actually me. Like, if I could figure out how to get those skills and actually, humble myself to learn that from other people, like that would make a tremendous difference in my life. So what I would tell all of you to do as you're trying to start this journey into what I should do, analyze yourself. And you have to be really, really brutal. So it can't be one of those things where your parents tell you all the time that you can go on American Idol and you're gonna win. No, you're not gonna win, okay? You're gonna end up on the gag reel and it's gonna be embarrassing and it's gonna follow you for the rest of your life, okay? So you gotta be brutal, even though other people might not be. And you have to create an action plan. One of my favorite quotes is this one, which is, innovation is the outcome of a habit, not a random act. And so what you have to do as you start and go through this and you start creating your action plan, it's what types of habits do you want to form that are gonna allow you to then unlock your potential to get into whatever tech job you're looking for. So, when I started thinking about this particular presentation, I started thinking about all the people that I know who are really great at tech, like the people who I admire, the people who get paid the most money, the people who get the most promotions, the people who get the most responsibilities, and I started thinking about their characteristics, and it starts off with being curious, right? I will tell you, I read about everything. If you tell me any topic, any word, I will go Google it. Like I found out recently that Linda Ronstadt is actually really cool. Like I couldn't figure out why she was getting a Kennedy Center Honors Award, and I started looking her up, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's a G. Like she's helping out Mexican Americans, she's helping out women. Like how did I not know this? And the thing is, you have to be curious. When things come up that you don't really understand, you have to start breaking it down and thinking about how do I figure out and become an expert at that thing. Then you have to lead with authority. This can also be construed as fake it till you make it, but I'm gonna call it lead with authority. And the reason for that is that a lot of times you're gonna be put in positions when you're looking for tech jobs or trying to get into tech, where you will have to be an expert on things that you don't really understand yet, but you have to be able to reel in folks to help them lead you to the right answer. And then accountability. Oh my gosh. Every person I've ever seen flame out, like I've seen some of the smartest, most talented people in the world not do well in tech because they are not good at being accountable. And so what that means is you can legitimately be a genius, but if you tell someone that the code's gonna be finished on Friday and it's never done by Friday, you're gonna get fired. And you're not gonna be able to get another job in tech, right? So accountability is one of those things that you have to put inside yourself. And I will say, as someone who is a little bit older than you guys, but not ancient, I was really bad at this when I first started, so I actually had to create systems. Like for instance, my wife will tell you, I do everything as soon as I think about it. And she's just like, well, why do you do that? And I was like, honestly, I won't do it. I know myself. Like I'm one of those people who just will not follow up and will not do it. And so my accountability measure is I have to do everything as soon as I think about it. You have to be a self-starter. So with tech, actually with all jobs, so I should also say, with my background, I didn't start off in tech. So I started off in, retail store management and consulting and analysts and sales and marketing and all these things. But all these jobs have the same exact attribute, which is you have to figure out how to do it. And a lot of times you're working in technologies or industries that have not existed before, so then you really have to figure out exactly where you're gonna begin and end. And then you become the person who gets to decide, well, this is the way we're gonna do it now. Moving to Netflix, this is one of those really interesting areas where they were just like, well, we actually don't know how this is gonna go, but you seem like you could figure it out. And I was like, sure, I can do that. And you have to be self-aware. So this is really hard. And many of us don't get taught this skill. You have to kind of learn it over time, but you really have to be aware of what your issues are so that you could be more successful. Again, as someone who was really bad at accountability, I had to create my own mechanisms because no one else was going to help me with that. And they don't tell you that, right? They just suddenly, you just stop getting some of the assignments that you wanted. You stop, getting called back for certain things because they see that in you, but they might not tell you. And so, what does this mean? You have to have class. Right. Which, by the way, so my designer, she's really great. So whenever I do these presentations, I send it over to my designer, and she'll go through, and she's like, do you realize that spelled out class? I was like, no, girl. I said, if I had tried to do that, that would not have happened. Like, not at all. But you do have to have class. And in fact, when I think about, so I met Tim Cook at the Pride Parade last year, and as a fellow Southerner, we talked for a long time, so that's how you know. That's how that desperate we are for other Southerners in California. And he was just like, he's like one of the classiest, like, most gentlemanly dudes I've ever met, and I just wanted to be around him. And so there's something powerful about that, right? Being someone who other people just kind of look at and go, oh, that person just seems so great and so cool. And that's kind of where you start off with being a likable person. So then next up, you've done all of that, you understand exactly what kind of skills you need, so what's going to be your action plan? So you have to list out the traits and skills you would like to develop. So one of the other things about this, if you want to be an engineer, a software engineer, if you want to be product manager, program manager, and you actually start understanding what those skills and traits are, you should list those out and then figure out exactly how you're going to get those different skills. If you want to learn Java, are you going to try out every week a different type piece of Java so that you can understand all those different pieces? That's one step that you can take. So that's an example. You also have to develop a squad of accountability partners, all right? A lot of times these are other people who are on the same hustle that you're on, right? These are people who either want to go in a similar industry or an industry that's kind of in the same track as what you're doing, and then they'll be able to hold you accountable. I have 6 or 7 people that I call all the time where I'm just like, okay, so I'm working this project. This is really going awry. I know I did this and this. What do you think I should do next? And then also, how can you make sure that I do that thing and I come back to you and let you know that I did it? Right? And those people really, really help me be successful every day. But I will also say this is one of the hardest things for you as a young person, right? Because all of you kind of don't know what you're doing, right? So some of those accountability partners might look like people who aren't in your same field. It might be your parent. It might be your uncle. It might be your cousin. So it might be someone who may be a little bit more senior to you who already has some of these skills who can help hold you accountable to them. And then you have to grab a teacher, not a mentor. So actually, I really hate the theory of mentors because mentors don't necessarily, the idea of a mentor is that they don't necessarily show you what needs to be done. They give you different suggestions, and then you have the opportunity to actually either implement those suggestions or not implement them. Instead, find a teacher. Find someone who's going to actually go, okay, A, B, C, D is exactly what you should be doing. This is how you do A. Follow up with this person. I had a call today with another person at Apple, and she was just kind of talking about all the different things she wanted to implement. I was like, okay, cool. So call this person. Make sure you talk to this person today. Call this other person over here. Make sure you talk to them today. And then send me a message later saying that you did, right? And so that's like giving her all the types of information she needs and actually showing her how to execute on those things. And then set specific benchmarks. So when I first started off in tech in 2010, so 10 years, oh, so long. So when I first started off in tech 10 years ago, I started off as a, basically first level tech support person. And I realized like a week into that, I was like, oh, this is not going to work. Because if I had to tell one more person how to do control copy or control paste, I was literally going to slit their wrist because I'm not going to kill myself. But I was just like, hey, I was like, how can I make sure I do not have to freaking do this anymore? And so I actually started putting in, I was like, so in a year, I need to get this certification. In 2 years, I need to have this other certification. In 3 years, I need to go to this master's program. And then I made sure I hit every single one of those. And then I didn't even think about coming to California. I just wanted to have a really nice, cushy tech job in Chicago. Although when I reassessed my goals 4 years ago, I was like, you know what? I probably have to go to California just so I can make sure I'm better than all the rest of them because that's my ego. I have a very healthy ego. It's not good. My wife does not like it, but I do have a healthy ego. So I've told you all this information. And you're like, oh, so this is really easy. But it actually isn't. So there's this chart called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So basically what it says is that when you first start off on something, you have all the confidence in the world, and you're the ruler of Mount Stupid, right? Like you literally think, oh, I just learned about something. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be better than everyone else. And then you're like, oh, I'm so bad at this. So then you have like this despair, right? So this is where many of us are. In fact, I think in college, I was like, when I was a freshman in college, I was definitely the ruler of Mount Stupid. And then I realized how hard it was going to be to actually like graduate and actually get a job and do all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to graduate. How can I go back in my mom's womb? But she said no to that. She's 100% no. And then you start doing this enlightenment. So it's when you actually start, like, so this isn't necessarily when you start learning, like book learning. It's usually when you start like learning from other people, when you start connecting with other people, and they start explaining to you how this actually works, right? So like when you want to get to this slope, so if you're in the despair, valley of despair right now, one, if you're in this room, you're already on the slope of enlightenment, right? Because you've already decided to be here and get this information. But you can actually supercharge that, right? Like you can actually start thinking, okay, now that I've talked to B, I might connect with B on LinkedIn. I might see if B might accept one of my messages, and as long as it's not silly, I might. And then you can actually get more information. So just keep going through and getting more information that way. And so then, once you've got all this information, you will be in sustainability, right? And that's really what we all want. We just want to be able to sustain success and not be scared all the time because, it's scary working and paying bills, and also my taxes are due soon, and I'm very terrified. So I totally get it. So then I was thinking about like types of roles that I see, because obviously when I say how to find the right fit in tech, I need to point out some roles that might actually exist. So obviously you have software engineers, you have designers, managers, business analysts, data science engineering, operations, marketing, QA, business development. But this list is very much not exhaustive. Also, what does it even mean to find the right fit in tech? Do you want to be a tech person, or do you want to actually start off like I did, which is I just had a business and marketing background, and I learned a whole bunch of technology. So there's lots of different ways to be a part of tech in non-traditional ways that may never have occurred to you, right? And so because of that, I really want you to think, what new technology does is create new opportunities to do a job that customers want done. And so I include this quote because when I was thinking about getting in tech, Apple existed. So like I knew that Apple was a company that existed, but I didn't know that the Apple Watch was going to exist, or the iPhone was going to be what the iPhone is, or the health app, which is one of the big bets that Apple is moving forward, is going to exist, or that Apple HomePod and Home would actually exist, right? So one of the things you need to think about is what's the next role in tech, right? Apple actually employs just as many doctors now as product managers, right? And so when you start thinking about that, it means, again, your path into tech may be something that we've never even considered. And it also might be something that you're already vastly interested in. I also think about like Impossible Burger or Beyond Burger, right? And so folks who actually really just wanted to grow, proteins and figure out how to make them sustainable made a really great Whopper. I appreciate them so much for that because I don't feel guilty anymore. But it's this idea that these roles are like evolving much quicker than we can even think about what we want to do in tech. So then one of the things I suggest is to become your tech hero, right? So become the person who is, well, I don't want to use that one, guys. I'm trying to think who's a person who is not problematic ever. Okay, so become Tim Cook, because this is people's their current heroes. And so how do you become a tech hero? So first of all, you have to use fear as fuel. So I was reading this really, really good interview from Melinda Gates, and she was talking about that she's been scared almost every day that she's done anything, right? She talked about when she first started working at Microsoft, she had to go in the room with like all these brilliant people and explain to them a very difficult concept. And she literally shook. And in fact, I actually shake every time I talk, and I have to I haven't gotten over it, and I've talked 100 times now, right? But it's just those things that we do it because we love it, and even though we're terrified of it. And in fact, she talked about how she was on a retreat with a whole bunch of some of the girls in one of her programs, and she had to throw an axe for the first time, and she was so terrified that she was going to completely whiff on it in front of all these people, and she's like this successful billionaire lady. And so the greatest accomplishment that she'd had in 6 months was that the axe actually stuck the first time. right? So again, it doesn't matter how successful or how cool you are. Like, it's hard. It's very easy to be fearful. Also, you have to be patient. So when you first start in tech, honestly, I'm just going to say it how I would say it to anyone. You're going to get the shit jobs. Okay. Even if you're a software engineer, you're going to get the worst projects, the ones where people like the legacy code, because they're going to teach you how the systems work, and it's going to be like the biggest slog ever, and you're going to hate your life, right? But on the flip side of it, you need to know your worth, right? So like, I was talking to one of my friends recently, and she's working at this great startup, and her salary is okay, but she realized in this particular case, she's like, I am not learning anything. In fact, I feel like I'm teaching other people. She's like, I'm too young to be maxing out at my potential. And so she actually just quit her job, and she's going to spend the next 3 months really hardcore looking for a new job because she knows that she deserves more than what that company was offering her. Also, always lead with facts. So going back to this idea of like, Mount Stupid and being fearful, actually figure out exactly what skills, what talents, what information you need to be successful, right? Don't let it be something as simple as, oh my gosh, I mean, if I had thought, in 2008 when I graduated from college, I would never have told you that I was going to be in tech because I was not someone who would be in tech, right? And the thing is that sometimes we do the work to eliminate ourselves before anyone else eliminates us. And so you should always lead with facts and not emotions. Everyone eats. So this is actually something that's very controversial, right? Because like when we think about modern tech companies or really any tech company, we think, oh, they just want to kind of like become monopolies and all this other type of stuff. But it's actually not actually true. I actually believe, and when I look at like, Tim or, BSIVs, it actually is much easier when we actually incentivize a lot of people to do lots of interesting work, right? And so as a tech hero, spread this information around, spread your talent, spread your skills around, because it really makes a huge difference to the entire ecosystem, the more talent that we have. And then pay it forward. That's very obvious. I drove through Narnia for you guys because I think I should pay it forward, okay? It's just something you should do. I also will say, I was talking to one of my coworkers today because we were talking about the fact that he is really good friends with a senior engineering person at Apple, and he's just living in Arizona chilling, and the guy goes, I need you to come up here and help and whip this team into shape, and he actually gets flown up every week. And he's just like, I don't understand how I'm at Apple doing this job, getting paid more money in my life, taking care of my family better than I've ever taken care of my family. And I was like, it's because you're a nice person. And he was like, B, you're a nice person too. That's why you're here. He's just like, if we weren't if we weren't kind to people, we wouldn't have gotten many of the opportunities that we've gotten just because people wanted to work with us again. So it makes a really big difference to be helpful to others. So this one is also kind of controversial because I've said all this like really, like nice stuff about being great, but also some people suck. So feel free to fire people, things, and jobs, right? So my friend who just fired her job, again, it wasn't worthy of her. It wasn't worthy of her talent, and she needs to be investing in herself all the time. So when you're thinking about the first tech job that you have or getting a tech job, make sure it's worth your while. So I was, so you mentioned Cars.com. I actually left Cars.com in 6 months because it was like the worst company I'd ever worked for. I was just like, y'all are so scary. I don't understand why y'all are so mean to each other. I was like, do you treat your mama like this? Like, who are you? Like, why are you acting like this, right? And so the thing is that sometimes you have to take these like very drastic moves because you need to move forward in whatever you're looking to do, right? And so that's going to make it a little bit easier for you as well. So then there's this next quote. So you can only become truly accomplished at something you love. Don't make money your goal. Instead, pursue the things you love doing and then do them so well that people can't take their eyes off of you, right? This is a very true fact, right? My job is to help other people be awesome, right? I really like helping people be awesome. And so what that means is that I get to go out and do lots of really cool stuff at tech companies in front of you guys all over the world just by doing what I love. So if there's something, again, if there's something that you're already interested in, for instance, if you're someone who's interested in finance, maybe you only look at fintech companies. If you're interested in health, only look at health companies. Try to figure out exactly what you're interested in, because then you can actually go in to those companies and look for it. So one of the companies I worked for many, many moons ago, the reason I got hired is because I'm actually a Southerner. So they had a whole bunch of clients who were in the Deep South. I was the only person who interviewed who had any Southern experience, and they were like, well, this dude had like 5 years experience on you, but you speak Southern. And I was like, yes, I do. And I will make greens, okay? I will make this work out, right? And it makes a huge difference. And that job was actually a key job that then got me the next role that was really my big break in tech, right? And so it's this idea that, like, again, you don't have to go in thinking you're going to do one thing. Instead, go in thinking about what makes you you and try to do that thing. And so that's the end of the presentation. Yes.
Hello. All right, why don't we give B another round of applause for that wonderful presentation. So now we're gonna open it up for questions and answers. If anybody has any burning questions that they'd like to ask B about their path. Over there. Oh, should I walk the mic? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Johnny. My question is, you're taking on the role of project management. If you could create your ideal project or product manager, what kind of experience would you throw into that hypothetical person in the past?
So actually, it's no experience, right? I think you have to have innate qualities. The qualities I listed up there, start there, right? But the other thing that I would add for like project and product management, you have to be really, really skillful at sniffing out bullshit, right? Because you have to understand, like, when you're a product manager or project manager, you have, like, it's always almost always tied to a very specific business goal, right? And so because it's tied to a very specific business goal, you have to make sure that you keep people honest. And a lot of people, they're not really good at understanding their own capabilities, or they're overly ambitious, or they're really scared to like disappoint you. So you have to be able to sniff that out. Secondly, you have to understand and be able to communicate very effectively why, right? The thing about everyone, it doesn't matter how much money you pay people, unless they're really inspired by why they're doing something, they won't necessarily be as beholden to actually executing on that thing. So you have to be really good. Like, you know, I always tell people, I'm so happy I used to be in sales, because I'm really good at pitching everybody, right? So like, those are different skills that you have to have. And then obviously third is you have to be very organized. And so that's something that's actually more difficult than you would think. But being able to organize things and being able to organize them in ways that is easily digestible to other people.
Any other questions in the front?
Hi. So I was wondering, since you just mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that you're thinking of or that you're going to be moving on to Netflix, at what point in your career, like at a certain job, do you think about moving to the next company? And does that like have anything to do with what goals you had at that job? Or like, how do you know, when it's time to move on? Do people just give you offers? They're like, Netflix was like, oh, we think you'd be great at this. But yeah.
So it's a mix. So once you get to a certain point in your career, especially if you're good at networking and you can kind of like garner a reputation. Because to be truthful, you garner a reputation. If you do good work, people are going to talk about you. Like, so you will get offers. So that always happens. But I like to curate my work experience. So like, I have like a specific goal for every job I go into. So for at Apple, I wanted to understand what it looked like to scale at this rate, right? Because when I launch something at Apple, tens of millions of people get it within minutes, right? So that's like a really big difference, and I'd never worked at a company like that. And for instance, when I'm moving to Netflix, one of the focuses that I'm going to have is like understanding data and using data as a tool to influence the product roadmap, right? And it's a much higher level with much more complex data than I've ever worked with before. So it's a combination of the two. So one, you might be presented an offer that's so great that you're like, even though I haven't gotten exactly what I wanted out of this job, I'm going to go ahead and take that leap because this new thing is just so intriguing that I need to try it. But on the flip side of it, it might be that I've just learned everything. Like, you know, at some point at Apple, actually, like last, like August or September, I was just like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to learn anything more here in terms of how to scale this up, right? Like I figured out how we do it. We do it pretty consistently. I think I could go duplicate this somewhere else. And so at that point, you know, companies started approaching me, and I actually started talking to them. And then, you know, Netflix actually invited me to dinner, and they had top shelf. Like that's, I'm gonna say, like if you want to impress somebody, make sure the whiskey is good. All right, that's all I'm gonna say.
I actually have a question for you. So we all know tech is a very, very fast-moving environment. How do you recharge doing all the wonderful work that you're doing?
So it's like very interesting, right? So actually, so I'm starting at Netflix on March 9th, but I told them, I was like, just so you know, I have like a 7-day trip to Tokyo. So like I'm taking that trip, right? So I think it's also about putting specific boundaries. Like I'm actually really, really, really effective at creating boundaries for myself and with anyone, right? But that's not necessarily a skill that everyone has. And so what I would suggest is coming up with that, right? If you know that you need X amount of time. So for instance, like my little sister's a great example. Do not talk to my sister on Sunday. She doesn't matter who you could be God herself. If you try to talk to her on Sunday, she will ignore you, right? She's just like, Sundays are my day. I'm not going to do it. So you just have to figure out exactly what you need. But it goes back into that idea of assessing yourself, right? Because you really have to understand who you are and what you need, right? And then you also have to like really stay attuned to your body. So it's really interesting. So we were watching, and we're watching Doctor Who, which led us to Nikola Tesla. So Nikola Tesla only slept like 2 hours a night, and I have this weird thing where I only sleep like 4 hours a night. But the 2 hours before I go to sleep is always just like my quiet time to just like reflect or think about things that I'm really concerned about, or I think that would just make me happy, right? So, you know, and that time is usually when I recharge. But again, you have to figure out what is really great for yourself.
Any other questions? Let's go here and then here.
Hello. My name is Margaret, and my question was, have you ever engaged with creating like intellectual property that eventually becomes part of the company's IP, that becomes part of its assets? And if so, have you ever had any sort of legal struggle over your creation and whether or not it's fully the company's property? Thank you.
So first and foremost, if you create something while an employee, so most tech companies, your contract, like your agreement that you sign, you actually are saying as soon as you sign it, anything you develop in that period is theirs, right? So the first thing I would say is that if you think that you're going to create something that's amazing, do not sign that. In fact, take it to an attorney and counteroffer that. Right? Because you definitely don't want to sign something like that. I've actually had situations where folks have created things with the company, but then they thought it was theirs. But the simple fact is that you signed something on day one that said it was theirs, right? So you have to make sure you're very, very clear about what you sign. Secondly, if you already are creating a company, many contracts actually will say something where you have to disclose exactly what you've already created, exactly what it is. If you filed anything, make sure you fill it out. Even if it's just an idea, still fill it out, saying like, this is what I think I'm going to create. And then if they ask you to create factual proof, fake something, right? So that at least you can still keep it as yours. But yeah, so the number one thing is read your contracts very, very specifically. So for instance, like at Apple does not allow people to do speaking engagements, but I refuse to work at Apple without being able to do speaking engagements. And so my contract actually grandfathers me in saying I can do speaking engagements. I just can't do them over a certain economic amount, which is very strange, but it's a whole thing. But it's about making sure that you understand exactly what you're getting into and being very strategic in what you choose.
Hi, I'm here with an invitation. I'm with a group that does climate change work. It's very exciting, and we're just startup, but we have the possibility of affecting global warming. We're all working pro bono for free right now, but there's a possibility of being paid in the future. We're almost all white males. Obviously, I'm not quite part of that. And so we are looking to diversify our leadership. And I came here today hoping that someone would be interested in possibly working with this team or finding out more about it. It's atmospheric chemistry, but I'm not a scientist. There's plenty of other work to do. As
What's the website they can go to if they want to find out more information?
ironsaltaerosol.com.
So that's IRONSALTAEROSOL.com.
Amen.
All right, cool. Y'all can check her out. All right.
Any other questions for B?
So one, it's really hard. You know, like Cars.com is a great example where everything looked right. I had friends who had worked there. I had people inside of it, and it really turned toxic in like a month, right? So it's very difficult to know 100%. But what I will say is cold call people, right? Try to get people in different departments, different teams, like go to different networking events to meet people. Like on LinkedIn LinkedIn and Facebook before I took the job at Apple or Sprout Social, I just reached out to people who had, that they had worked at those companies. I was just like, hey, I know you don't know me. And there's no reason for you to respond to me, but it would be so cool if I could just ask you a couple questions about this company because I'm really considering it, and I really want to make sure that I'm safe. And I should say that as someone who is, trans, non-binary, black, lesbian, it's very important for me to be safe, right? And even at Netflix, I reached out to Renee Gray, who's the VP of D&I, because I was just like, well, she may not respond back, but on the flip side, if she does, that's a really great sign. And she did. She responded back, and she hooked me up with someone who's a program manager, and we just talked about the different mechanisms that they put in place to make sure it's a safe environment for me. So that's why, it's very important to reach out to people, because also, I'm going to be truthful, a lot of the values and missions, they don't necessarily reflect what actually happens inside of companies. And I also should say that there's different divisions within companies, too. So, for instance, there's a lot of controversy going on with Google, right? So, like, YouTube had, like, the whole walkouts. Certain parts of Google, like the cloud, parts of it are very upset because, they're helping to support the gelling of children and all this other type of stuff. But on the flip side, Alphabet, the X Factor, is doing some of the most amazing, interesting work in the world, right? And so people who work for those divisions are super happy and content. So there's also like the fact that, when you get into these large conglomerations, there are always going to be some areas that are like really phenomenal and great, but there might be other areas where you're like, ethically, I don't necessarily like that. I mean, even myself personally, working at Apple, one of the things I was really worried about was, the situation, like how, China works, for instance, like, Hong Kong, the protests, and I was just like, okay, I'm working at Apple, and a large amount of our money comes from China. So, like, what happens if something really happens? I've been very happy with how they handled it, but that was something that I had to really think about before I took that job because, from a moralistic standpoint, would I be comfortable with some of the decisions I would have to make?
Mentioned something about mentorship versus teaching, which I like the concept of, but how do you identify a teacher and how do you, when you're not exposed to them on a day-to-day, right? Like, how do you identify a teacher and how do you work with them? I think the hardest part is finding willing teachers.
Okay. Can you say the first question again?
The first question is, how is being black in tech?
Okay. I'm going to start off with the easier one, which is how to find a teacher. So It's hard. It's just like interviewing for a job. It's like you don't necessarily know. For instance, I've had a lot of people who call themselves my mentors, and we would have like a great like 3 or 6 months. Like the honeymoon was like so lovely. Like we were like walking and frolicking on the beach, and then they just dropped off the face of the earth, right? I think a lot of times it just starts off with like a real conversation, right? The people who want to teach you and kind of take you by the scruff of your neck. I'm from the South. They take people they grab you by your neck and drag you. So they're the ones who grab you back there and go, like, I want you to be awesome. Okay, I need you to do these things. So it's a little bit of like that spidey sense that you probably get about people that you know who are going to follow through versus people you know who aren't going to follow through. All of us know those people who you don't really have to put that time on your calendar because you know they're never going to call you, right? So it's a little bit of that, like trying to have, and you have to start growing that. Right? You have to start growing that ability. And also the teachers don't have to be an expert in the thing that you specifically want to do. They have to be a person who has the capability of helping you understand the types of things that might go into that and then giving you tools to accomplish that, right? So that's another thing about it. So you don't necessarily have to find a software engineer who's going to be your teacher. You can find a product manager who works with software engineers who can say, these are the types of things that I have seen consistently be great. And so this is where I'm going to direct you to. And I'm going to actually make sure I follow up this week and the week after that and the week after that to make sure you're doing those things, So that's the first thing. Secondly, it's very lonely being black in tech, right? It was very, very lonely. Apple, I think the black in Apple group now is like, I know Apple has 135,000 employees, and I think there's like 3% of us are black or something like that. And then even within that, there's like 36,000 employees in this area. And I don't know, it's like micro, like it's like this many of us. We fit in one restaurant. Actually, we fit in one banquet room in a restaurant. We don't even fill up the full restaurant, right? But on the flip side of that, we are the coolest, dopest group of people in the world, right? So it's like one of those things. Like what's really interesting about this, being black in tech probably means you're some of the most excellent, most talented black folks in America, in the world, because like you survived, you figured out how to like navigate, you figured out how to make people comfortable. Although I like to make people uncomfortable. That's why I wore that sweatshirt today. I had some meetings with some VPs today, and I was just like, they gonna listen to me today, right? So like you also figure out ways to, help mold people into what you want, right? Next week I'm actually giving a talk for the entire MAPS division about being an ally to black people. And then I asked my whole team to come because I was like, y'all are not really good at that all the time, so y'all should come too, right? And so it's just this idea of like, you almost become militant. Like I actually used to be like this really quiet, adorable teddy bear, okay? I was. And then I was just like, wait, but I'm tired of being the only one. Like there's 2 black people on my floor, there's 6 black people in my entire building, and there's like 1,800 people in my building, right? And I got really tired of being that person. So like, how can we actually make sure that we're creating a non-hostile space for black people and brown people and LGBTQ people to come into? Because to be truthful, many spaces in tech aren't like that, and there's only a few companies that really do a good job at it, and I happen to be at one and I'm going to another one, right? So the overarching idea that I guess I'm going to give you is, 1, we're freaking awesome, but it is very lonely.
I have another question for you. Can you talk a little bit about your work with Lesbians Who Tech and other LGBT-focused tech groups, and sort of how you integrate that into your everyday work life?
Yeah, so actually it's really funny. I was talking to Leanne because I got recruited to do another tech event the same week as Lesbians Who Tech for a lot of money in Florida. And I was like, but girl, I got to give you I got to do Lesbians Who Tech, because Lesbians Who Tech is actually the very first speaking engagement I ever had. And it actually is the one that launched kind of my career in the West Coast. And so one of the things about, so I'm in a very specific place of privilege. I make more money than anyone in my family has ever made. I transition in a way that was not harmful in any way. My mama and my daddy loved me despite my dad's a Baptist minister, and he was just like, baby, I just pray for you every day. I know the sin is bad, but I still love you, right? So it's just like, so I have been very fortunate in my life to not really have a lot of the same obstacles as a lot of people who are as diverse as I am have had. And because of that, I make it very, I try very specifically to participate in any organization that deals with LGBTQ or black or non-male issues, because it makes sense, right? Because like if I can be of service to someone else and have this message, or be someone who can connect someone to someone else, it's just something that you should do, because again, you have to pay it forward.
Okay, so just a follow-up to the teaching question. What are some things that you look for in individuals when you decide to be a teacher to them, I guess?
Oh, it starts off with follow through. Like, don't send me messages that are dumb. Oh my gosh. And don't rush me. Don't. First of all, do you like rush a queen? Like, why would you do that? Like, why would anyone do that? Right? So like, it's about being respectful. And so actually it's really interesting because as I've done more of this, I interact way more with all these people now, right? And so I get like these out of the blue messages where someone's like, oh, I saw you this thing, and I think you need to recommend me for this job because it's what I deserve. And I'm like, but how do you know you deserve that? Because first of all, I don't know who you are. You've not given me your value add. Like if I recommend you at Apple, right, or Netflix, whatever company I'm working at, my money depends on you, right? What value are you going to provide to me as an employee of my company that's going to make a difference to me, right? So it's about making sure that you're very clear and concise into what you need, why you need it, and how you're going to employ that thing, right? I don't really like people who do that weird like, hi, and that's all they send. Like, they don't send anything else. I'm like, but why would I respond to a hi? Right? I'm one of those weird people who still is confused by why everyone in California says hi to you on the street. Like, I don't understand that. Like, it's very strange to me. Right? So, like, it's just like the thing. Like, I look for people who obviously seem to be organized, thoughtful, considerate, and ambitious. And I'm like, oh, my investment's going to really pay off here. Like, this is someone I can really kind of, if I put a little sprinkle on that, it's going to be really, really good.
Did we have a question over here? Any other questions?
So I was wondering how, do you think that since you've worked at like a big company like Apple and, are going to Netflix again, how do you think like big tech companies how do you think they're contributing in terms of getting more minorities to join the tech world? And do you think they're doing a good job, or do you have any ideas for how they could do better? Especially because like I feel like there's such a association with like tech people being super nerdy, or just, I don't know, they fit one role, and that kind of like, I don't know, plays out how it is in school, I guess, a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, so this last round, once I actually decided I was going to apply to other jobs, like I don't know, I had like 6 or 7 like in-persons and got like 4 job offers. And every single person that I had an in-person with, I asked, and I for the most part at my level now, I usually have at least one meeting with like director, VP, someone like that. And so once I got to those people, the only questions I asked them, because they would be like, oh, what do you want to know about this company? I would say, oh, they're like almost no non-males here. There are almost no non-white people here. There are almost no non-Asian people here. What are you doing to change that, right? And so one of the things I thought was very interesting is like 60%, well, no, so 7, 3, so only 3 of those companies, which is like 40%, actually knew or had an answer or even had an opinion about it, And the opinions really went this way, which was, I don't know, girl. Like, we're really bad at it. We really try hard. We put a lot of money in it, but I don't get it. Like, it was really, like, one guy, he looked like he was going to, like, he turned so red. It was, like, adorable, actually. He was just like, I just think we're really bad at it. I don't know how we can get better at it. And actually, I'm really excited that you're here because, like, maybe you can help me. Like, let's just talk about this for, like, the next 30 minutes, right? And that's really what the conversation was. What I think is very interesting is that a lot of people who are now becoming leaders of organizations, I mean, obviously, there's still toxic tech companies, but when you start thinking about, like, the most forefront tech companies, it does not behoove any of them to not actually have a diverse workforce. One, they're working in too many products that are across too many different areas of the world, across too many different disciplines, to not have lots of people with lots of different opinions in those buildings. I mean, that's why, like I said, Apple has as many doctors as they have product managers now, right? And it's because you need these types of people to come into your space to allow you to build a product that's going to be successful. However, they really don't understand how to do it. And secondly, there's not, even if you're trying to recruit more diverse people, there's not a lot of diversity in the Bay Area, right? So like, how do you import people in? I remember when I had to make the decision to move from Chicago, like a mecca, right, of diversity. Here, I was like, you know what? I need someone to give me like a very specific direction that this is going to be okay. And I actually met a group called Sister Circle, and their founder, Lexi, and she was like, we're going to be your family. It's going to be okay, right? But it is this idea that like there isn't a lot of folks. It's very expensive to import people, and it's very expensive to be wrong, right? And so you have like a lot of different things that are kind of influencing things. But what I do think is happening is they're willing to put more money into it. You know, Sister Circle being a great example, where they're actually doing a private dinner with Facebook in a couple of weeks, right? And Facebook put down like 20 grand for this private dinner for them to just recruit Black and brown engineering leaders to come there to talk to Facebook, right? So there is this like this new renewed energy to figure out how to make this work and make it be more successful. But it starts with us, right? Like, so we get to go up and say, you know, we're talking about protesting. If a company does not follow or does not seem to be following the values that you like, you also can lead with your, you know, your money. You know, I don't buy products from companies that I do not think have great ethics. I'm never going to buy an Away bag. I was like, that CEO is crazy, you know, and she's a woman, you know. So it's just like this idea that like we also get to choose which companies we think are the best companies, and then if we then put our energy back into companies that are actually supporting our values, is going to make a tremendous difference.
Any lingering questions for B? Over there.
Can you talk about your interview experiences?
Well, so there's a very big difference because, like, you know, I'm very senior now, so like a lot of times there's like dinners and like cocktails, which is very nice because I like a free meal. I know I could be a millionaire and I'm still gonna like a free meal. That's just who I am. But let's say like when I was getting to my first establishing roles, what I actually found is that those were much more complex actually than my current interviews because most people now assume I have the skills. And so I don't have to prove that. Whereas when I first was starting out, I had to do a lot of work and a lot of homework to make sure I could pass like the technical aspects of that. And the technical aspects could be different because even if you're doing like a BDR role, so a business development role, they might ask you like complex questions of what it means to like use a SaaS product. And then you have to understand what a SaaS product is and like what the different complexities of that is, right? So again, it goes into homework. So as you're kind of thinking about what you want to do, start looking at that company, start looking at like, you know, what that role might entail, and then have a very specific opinion or slant on that. Because that's what people are kind of looking for. They're looking for people who, you know, can take in a lot of information and regurgitate it, again, no matter what role you're in, and do so in a way that's very clear and concise. So it's like a 50-50 thing, actually. So not all companies, like if you're doing like the major companies, so like Google, Facebook, well, also the major companies that have very established project and product manager practices. Like at Netflix, I didn't have to do any of that because they actually don't have an established product management practice. So that's one of my goals, is to establish a product management practice there. But at companies that have a very specific practice, you do need to go through. And there's like, actually, if you go to my website, there's one of the links is product manager resources. And so all those resources generally will get you through any interview that you're trying to go through from a product manager perspective. But again, and what's really interesting about those case studies is that they'll be so off, like they'll be the weirdest things you've ever thought of. Like one of my case studies a couple years ago was how to like find food trucks in Chicago. And I was like, first of all, food trucks are not legal in Chicago, so you can't find them, right? But you have to still kind of work through. I mean, another question was like, so, and then also you might get like these really random analytical questions, which was like, how do you go through and figure out how many planes are in the air at any one time in America, right? And so and again, you're not going to find the answer. They're just trying to like have you go through and think through every possibility, right? And so that you to come up with the idea that you could potentially get to one distilled point if you needed to experiment on something. Also for product management, you have to do a lot of studying of like A/B testing and like analysis now, right? So I started off in product management in 2012, where none of these practices actually mattered. We didn't know what we were doing. But now, like, they actually want you to be pretty regimented and understand all the different tools and how you would actually make a decision, how you like manage a roadmap and things like that. Yes, so it's www.pagelsminor.com. So it's my name. So if you just Google B Pagels-Minor, I come up on all the different things I'm on. So what's really interesting is I've been a product manager my entire career, and only at Apple was I a program manager. It was exactly like my product manager experience. The only difference was they wanted to know a lot more about how I documented things, so like how I clearly communicated to people, and then also how I would deal with like conflict. Again, because it goes to this idea of like, oh, you're supposed to deliver something by this date. How do you go through and actually like facilitate like a decision, making a decision, making sure everyone understands why you made that decision, and then actually executing on it. So, but again, it was almost exactly like my product manager. It was just that little bit of documentation and also like timeline management, I guess, were the biggest differences.
Kind of going off that question, how do you sort of deal with different personalities doing all of the managerial work that you do?
It's hard. Okay. I'm going to tell you, I feel like I have a lot of babies. Like literally, like I didn't know if I wanted to have children, but then I realized I already had them. And so it just became a lot easier to deal with it because at least kids have to do what you say. Adults are much harder. But no, it is really, really interesting because you have, especially in tech, you have such disparate personalities. So there might be people who are really great at connecting and then explaining to you what's going on and like being very thoughtful. And then you might have someone who, frankly, we have a lot of people who are on the spectrum, they're on the autistic spectrum. And so a lot of times you're trying to like kind of coach them and help them kind of develop the right skills because they're brilliant, but they may not be able to communicate very effectively what the issue is. So it's very important to, again, one, I give people grace. Like I assume the best because again, we all got hired. So we obviously all have the right skills. We obviously all have the right desires. We just may not always like go about it in the same path. And so we have to give each other the grace to kind of screw up and kind of, discuss those things. I also have a 48-hour rule. Right. So anytime anything comes up in any situation, we have 48 hours to resolve it. So if I have a problem with something you did, if you have a problem with something I did, if you come to me and say that, Joe and, Fahim over here, they got problems, we all talk to each other and say, you got 48 hours to like hash this out and then we're never going to talk about it again. All right. Because we're mature adults. We challenge appropriately. We correct appropriately, and we hold each other accountable in the right way. And so it's about creating like frameworks for folks to be like very successful within the kind of complex and cross-functional work that we do.
Thank you. Any last questions?
So there's a couple different ways. Like, let's pretend we're in a scoping meeting, right? And the two of you just are disagreeing. You're yelling over each other, which does happen. I hate when people yell. Actually, everyone knows there's a no yelling and no cursing because I don't like it. I'm a Southern belle. I don't like those things. All right. So what I would say is like, hey, guys, we're not going to do that. We talk to each other respectfully. We do not raise our voices. You over here, you say your little piece. Okay, cool. That makes sense. You over here, you say your little piece. Okay, that makes sense. Half the time, 50% of what they're saying, they already agree on. They're just yelling over each other. So having them repeat it, I'll be like, okay, it sounds like you guys agree on this part, and you disagree on this part. Do we need to have a breakout to discuss that? Or do you think we can have this conversation right now? Or do you guys need to take like a little bit of a timeout? So it's just really just stopping people right where it is. And that's actually a big part of being a product manager, project manager, or program manager. It's your meetings, it's your product, it's your project. You own it. which means that the buck stops at you, you know? So like if you don't control what's going on between people, your project's not gonna work out, right? So it's very important to, like, again, it's about leading with authority, right? It's about standing up and saying, this is mine, and I'm actually the only one who gets to bitch, right? Like everyone else is gonna be very cool and very chill because it's all handled, right? So it's really just standing up and making people look at each other again and stop and think about what they're doing.
Uh,
So a couple of different things. So first and foremost, so for instance, I Googled Carmen before our first call, right? I do that for everybody. Anytime I'm talking to anybody, I need to understand a little bit of who you are, because I need to understand and whether we're going to engage. And part of my secret sauce is that I like to find something that I can connect on with someone, so we can instantly get to a place of vulnerability, so that we can actually talk truthfully to each other. Like that's one of the things I really focus on. But then secondly, any recruiter or hiring team worth their salt is going to give you specifically what types of questions each one should be asking you, right? If they don't, that actually might be a bad sign that the company might not be in a great place to hire you anyway, because they're not even organized enough to kind of set you up. But let's pretend you're interviewing for a program manager role, right? You should be able to kind of look at those titles. So it'll say something like, blah, 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 design lead, blah, 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 QA lead, blah, 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 program manager. So you'll be able to see very quickly that the design and the QA, they're not going to be able to ask you any nuance about what it really takes to be a program manager, right? So it's probably just going to be them going to ask you questions like, oh, how do you normally work with designers? Right, and you can just talk about it from that perspective. So there are definitely things that you can glean from who you're interviewing with. But like I said, I would also kind of challenge and say that the recruiter should be giving you some expectation setting, of what what each interviewer is going to be seeking from you. And then of course it's your job to do a little bit of homework and make sure that you kind of understand what's going on as well.
I had another question. So what would you say is something you'd wish you'd known going from a small to medium-sized company to giants like Apple and Netflix?
I'm trying to think. I guess, I don't think I knew necessarily how weird it was, right? When you're in a smaller company, you literally see your CEO. Like you can walk by your CEO, you can get time on your CEO's calendar, right? So one of the things I really had to learn, which I'm actually currently trying to decide if I want to unlearn it or not, is the idea of politics, right? You really have to understand what is important to different people and how to encourage that. So I've already said you have to explain to people the why. But the thing is, sometimes the why doesn't matter if the ROI for the entire corporation is privacy, for instance, right? So if my product needs to be built in a certain way, and that doesn't, flesh with our overarching goal of privacy, I actually get overruled completely on that, right? So it's just an interesting idea of the different things, nuance that you kind of have to navigate between the different parts of the organization, how those different things come together. And in fact, I tell people now, now that I've done this, is that you really have to kind of be, a scientist. You have to do, an archaeologist. You have to start actually doing a dig and digging up why people have made the decisions, what's going on around that. Because a lot of times it actually really makes sense, especially when you're dealing with a large company. So I work for the App Store, and we're in 155 countries. And so there's legacy code that we have in place for for instance, the Saudi Arabia, because there are very specific rules and religious customs that we have to meet, which means that we can't show certain apps there, and that totally makes sense, and we need to honor their own traditions, right? And so there's these different things that you kind of have to understand and have to start navigating and really being, successful at.
Thank you. Another question.
Hello again. I apologize for the imposition, but I can't quite help myself. Upon the mention of app, I can't help but wonder, what constitutes a successful app in the early stages for you? I bet you've seen so many of them.
Yeah, so it's really funny because actually when I first got this job, like everyone would come out and be like, "Oh my God, can you like put my app on blast? Like it's gonna be so great." And I was like, "No, I can't actually." So actually, the number one thing about an app being successful, one, is it actually working? I can't tell you how many times. I mean, actually, so I shouldn't mention this, but I'm gonna mention it because I thought it was hilarious. So the Iowa caucus app, right? So there, we actually, so obviously that wasn't, like, it was an iOS app, right? That means it went through our services. And so we actually had a whole big meeting with everybody to try to figure out what went wrong. Because we're like, did we do something wrong? Was it our fault? So what should we have done? And it turns out they never actually turned it on properly, right? So like, it's just like this really fascinating, fundamentally crazy thing that happened, and now we know about it. And we were just like, well, so maybe next time we have a high profile provider, we should probably just tell them how to turn it on. But anyway, so starting off with make sure it works. But secondly, really the public is what dictates a successful app. Like everyone thinks that Apple does something, but we really don't. Even the apps that we feature, they usually only get featured after there's such a groundswell of popularity that we're like, oh, well, now we want to really, take it to the next level because this app has already shown so much potential, and we want to just introduce it to more people.
If oh.
Okay, so a couple things. First and foremost, the best way to set a boundary in that case is through the interview process. Usually people show you a little bit of what they're going to do very early on in the process. So for instance, I remember one of my first jobs, they were like, yeah, we work a lot of weekends and nights. I don't work weekends and nights. I gotta watch my TV shows. I have to watch Grey's Anatomy every Thursday. Okay, so I'm just saying, through the interview process, you start picking up on these things. I remember listening to managers. They were just like, yeah, I'm a workaholic, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna take this job because if you're my manager, that means you expect me to be a workaholic. I also ask a lot of engaging questions during my interview, and I talk about a little bit of my values and things that make me most excited, and I like to listen to people and how they kind of respond to that. So for instance, I always talk about the fact that, my wife and I, we've made a conscious decision that we don't do certain types of work after a certain period of time, and it's something that we're guarded against. And my current manager, she was like, yeah, I'm the same way with my kids. Right, and so that's like something very, very important. Like you can actually ask the right types of questions before you ever get into that situation. Secondly, there's laws against that, right? I'm going to be truthful. So I'm on the board of directors for a very large LGBTQ center in Chicago. Actually, I'm going there tomorrow for a board meeting, and I'm also the HR committee chair. And so that's something that we talk about all the time. There's legal guard lines against these things. Document everything, right? Your boundary might be, I have documents proving that you've broken the law and I'm gonna win that lawsuit. I mean, I'm just gonna be truthful. And the thing that sucks about that though, is that you shouldn't have to do that. So it's very, 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 very important to kind of push back in a subtle way. The other good thing about being in the Bay Area is that there are a lot of different types of companies. Do not hang your hat on working at Facebook or Google or Netflix or any of those companies. There's a lot of amazing tech companies. My wife works at a startup called VoiceSpace that actually is looking for many employees. And it's really, really great, very chill atmosphere. Half the time, like my wife, she'll go in a little bit early and she leaves at 3 and she's chilling at the house I'm watching Netflix already. Because their company has a culture that supports folks doing the work that they love. Right? So make sure that you're being I call it being selfish. Like, I want to get the skills that I need, but I also am not going to be your slave. Because, sometimes that is what it is. And I also should say that, one of the things that's been very interesting for me as I've kind of grown up in my career is also even about folks with visas. Because it's not actually necessarily entry-level employees I've seen this mostly with. It's been people who have visas, for instance. And they'll be in a situation where they get asked to do more work than other folks who are citizens, right? And so again, it's being put in that position where you're like, well, but my visa's tied to this company. And I've actually seen people go to Canada or to Mexico and leave the United States because, those countries are much more cool about, your visa status to work for companies that are more ethical, right? And so there's no good answer to it, but it is about, knowing when the buck stops here, I think is really what it is. So there's a very big difference, okay? So first and foremost, most internships at modern technology companies are salaried, right? So you don't really necessarily have hours, right? So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Secondly, even as senior employees, if there's a big release that we need to actually do, we all will stay up all night, right? So I think that's a big difference. Like you have to, there's a big difference between what we might all do to successfully launch something versus other folks. Every tech company I've worked at that has interns has never treated interns like that, right? We pay them very well. We literally are like begging them to stay at the end if we like them, right? Because like it's so hard to find really talented young people that you can kind of groom into like really great, employees. So like we don't really risk them in that way. If you did come up a company, if there's a company that's doing that, I would suggest that you all start sharing that information because we would then just go poach all of their interns because we would know they're available. So.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. If anyone has any lingering thoughts.
Well, money. First and foremost, like you got to pay me what I think I'm worth, and if you don't pay me what I think I'm worth, it's not even gonna be a thing. Oh, okay. So there's a couple different things. So it depends on what status you are. So what I usually start to do is I figure out what my budget is, right? So I need to make X amount of money, and then I calculate that out over whatever the 26 paychecks or 24 paychecks, whatever that like thing is, and that's the number I need. For my Netflix job, I was like, you need to at least double Apple because Apple's chill. Like people like look at me, they call me, they think I'm so cute now. Like I don't need to leave, right? So like you come up with a number that makes sense for where you are in your life. When you first start off, it might be I need to make like, I don't know, my first job out of college, I made $48,000, which in Chicago in like 2008, holy crap, I was rich, right? So like you just have to figure out what it is like that level it is. And it needs to be something that's not just I survive, but like I survive plus I can take a trip or I can go, get me a nice meal, get me the new sneakers. It has to be a little bit of something because you want to thrive a little bit too and not just be, kind of suffering through. Secondly, I need to feel very confident that my whole self is going to be okay. One of the reasons I left cars.com is that a senior director told me that I was not going to go very far with my non-binary stuff. And I was like, girl, you're not going to go very far either. So it's okay. So it's just this idea, like, there has to be certain things that you will never do. Like, for instance, with Apple, if the China situation had gone left, I would have probably left Apple way sooner, right? Because I was never going to be someone, I don't actually understand everything that's going on there, but I know that it feels like something wrong is going on there. So if we were on the wrong side of history there, I would not have felt comfortable, right? So there's things that just come up. Like this is why it's so important to do that SWOT analysis and really figure out who you are, right? What are your core values? What are the things that like if you had to like, so when I do like my 2 hours before I go to sleep, a lot of times I just think about stuff. I'm like, what would happen if this happened? And how would I react to it? And so it's just preparing myself for situations so that if they do happen, I feel so confident. For this talk, I was like, okay, well, if there's this many students and there's this many different backgrounds, what kind of questions could they ask me? Let me think about it now so I won't feel uncomfortable in front of you. And so actually one of my favorite Tim Cook quotes, Tim Cook was just like, You know, so he went to Duke too, so we have a lot in common. I mean, we're basically best friends. Anyway, he was talking about graduating from Duke with his MBA, and he was just like, there's no way he would have thought that he's in the position he was in now. And all he really did was just start preparing. He started like reading things. He started, understanding different concepts. And so what happened is that every time he kept getting a new opportunity, he was already prepared for it. So like a lot of times it's just, think about what it is that you kind of want out of life, and then it starts becoming easier to figure out what your non-negotiables are.
Wow. Thank you so much, B, for giving us your time. Let's give them a warm round of applause.
Oh, a quick plug for Tara. So Tara and I, who is the next speaker, we met at a dinner last week. She's amazing. Definitely come for her too. Yeah.
Thank you.